Welcome to Write to Publish, your go-to podcast for all things writing and publishing. I'm Karen Stanley, a 14 times published author and the founder of Mabel and Stanley Publishing. Join me as I share a multitude of tips and insights drawn from my own writing and publishing journey. We'll be hearing from some inspirational authors too, who will share their writing experiences and top tips for success. Each week, we'll learn about an aspect of writing, from composition to genre and from publishing to marketing. Listen in as we learn and chat about all things writing and publishing, and let's get you on the right path. Hello and welcome to another episode with me, Karen Stanley, on the Write to Publish podcast. This week, we've got another of our fabulous authors with us, this time someone who's published with Mabel and Stanley Publishing as well, so it's a double whammy for me. We've got the awesome, inspirational and wonderful Steve Sallis. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Karen. Lovely. We've just spoke off air, Karen, haven't we, for about 25 minutes, which is typical us. We never stay on task. So I'm sure for this podcast, we will also not stay on task. So the listeners need to be ready for a free roll, don't they?
We do. We'll try really hard, but yeah, we can't promise anything. So, so do you want to tell people a little bit about you and what you do, first of all?
Well, I'll start going backwards. Instead of going backwards, I go forwards. My super strengths are really from working in Lewisham and Greenwich as a school teacher for 20 years. And that's where all my skills come from. And the problem with education is not very glamorous. Now, obviously, working with some of the world's best athletes, businesses, helping them with leadership, high performing teams, and generally creating a narrative to support people have a really successful life. And that entails children, families, CEOs, middle leaders, senior leaders, and England football players. So it's all a little bit of a mismatch of randomness, but I've managed to create a path since leaving education to really add value to the world. Oh, and finally, I'd also do a mindset project for kids in school. So, yeah, my super strength, though, and people need to listen to this. Yes, but it's schools. Schools made me, and worked in 4 failing schools in London and tried to help them become less failing.
Mm-hmm. Which is a feat in itself. I feel you. I was a teacher myself for a long time, so that's why we tend to end up going off task a little bit, because we end up talking about education. But it's so fundamental, isn't it, to what happens to a person as they get older, how their education shapes them and the path that they can take, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and the word used is sort of schema, how people think in terms of their cognitions, and I suppose like how people's belief systems, what they believe, and their self-efficacy to achieve. So a lot of my work is creating psychological safety for people to share with me their true authentic self, and that requires high EQ, not IQ. And if you're not familiar with the term and the acronym EQ, it means emotional intelligence, and as we know, that's one of the biggest missing links in the modern world. So the book, which we're going to discuss shortly, I'm sure, is really based around just be that person that says sensible things every day, Karen. I don't think it's that difficult. There's a lot of irrational, extreme behaviour going on. So what I'm trying to do is get people to look in the mirror, not out the window, and say, look, what can I do to improve, and how can I help society grow and improve the planet, really?
Yeah, that's it. So come on then, tell us about your book. What's the title of your book?
That's right here, Karen. I've got two. No, I've got 2 books, Karen. So that's probably easier. I can't say it. I might get told off. And
You're all right.
obviously the hard copy, and then I had the paper copy. So I'm over the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, very happy. Texted you yesterday, didn't I? Saying the hard copy's great. So how not to be a leadership dickhead and build a high performing team. Really, it's about my experiences and my journey of education, business, and professional football, and how many dickhead leaders I've met, and how I now help them. Obviously, I'm very privileged to work for UEFA now as a consultant, working with all of the world's best managers and trying to give them a narrative to be able to really add value to the teams and staff that they support. And then, yeah, just education, business, and sport. I'm in a real niche position where I've worked in all 3. So I've obviously gone into business and assumed they'd be really high performing. And then I've realised that actually they're not high performing, and I've got a real marketing business as well. So, as you know, I speak at events around the world talking about how we build high performing teams. So, hence the name of the book.
Yeah. And because I mean, whether you work in education, whether you work in business, these are all transferable skills, aren't they? Like you can be a good leader in every walk of life, or you can be a terrible leader in every walk of life. It's just about really being the best version of yourself. I think really is the ultimate message of the book, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's also themes on, I mean, I would call that character, not caliber, and someone's technical skills. I've got a theme in the book called the Peter Principle, where if you imagine great teachers in the classroom then get promoted to a level of middle leader and then they can't lead people, but they're really good in the classroom. If you look
Yeah.
at lots of people in government these days, they get head of office and then they get promoted and then they can't cope, they're out their depth. So the Peter Principle was spoken about in quite a big depth about you eventually get promoted to a level of incompetence. So I do think, yes, that there's a lot of character, but the caliber bit and the technical detail and knowing about the narratives of and the science of effective leadership. And I suppose I'll share this with you. One of the questions I ask on my corporate training is there a science to effective leadership? Discuss.
Mm.
And it still baffles me how some people say no. And then obviously we get into critical thinking where people then challenge the word science. And then I then bring in the word social before the science. And the science of social science has pretty much been proven that high performing teams is a science.
Mm.
And if we listen more and we go and get experts that tell us what to do, and we are caring to each other, and we have strategy and operation and KPIs, and we measure those KPIs, all of this stuff, how effective business runs. Of course, there's a science to effective leadership. So really, in the book, I talk about how that looks and how we can piece that together for effective businesses.
And people out there wanting to write a book, this hasn't been an overnight project for you, has it? How long has it taken you to write your book, would you say?
Well, I said to you, January 2023, I will get it to you by the end of the month.
Yeah.
I got it to you February 2024.
Yep.
Yeah. So that, by the way, and that's the editing part. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the editing part was a year, but
Mm.
before that, 5 years. My previous book was 5 years.
Yeah.
So my world, I call it a real life PhD. I don't have no interest in academic writing anymore. I find academic writing quite patronising, actually.
Mm.
So I've in my head I've got two PhDs, Karen, just called books.
Yeah.
So that's my real life study, to be honest. That's
Yeah.
what I've decided to do. After my master's degree, I was just done with academic writing. Don't
Yeah.
think it adds any value unless
Yeah.
you really like that style. And I don't
Yeah.
know anyone on the planet that likes that style. So
Not
I've
fun, is
tried
it?
to make this book really bite size. And you've
Yeah.
edited it, so you know the flow of the book. Every
Yeah.
chapter's 2, 3 pages. Pick it up,
Yeah.
put it down, move on.
Yeah, which does make it readable, and it kind of, it's very reflective of your passion for the subject, which I think, whenever I work with authors, particularly on business books, it's really important to be authentic and for that kind of passion to shine through, which I think that absolutely does in your book. So my next question was going to be why you decided to write the book, and I think you've answered that a little bit. Why was it, what was the ultimate decision that caused you to write your book, really? Because you've written a book before,
We've
haven't
all
you?
worked, yeah, but we've all worked under bosses that change your life, are in the middle or don't care, like a third, and a third.
Mm.
And then I've changed careers. I worked under 11 head teachers. Let me start with this. I worked under 11 head teachers in secondary schools. Three of them changed my life. They were game changers. They were on it ethically, morally, strategically, operationally, absolutely on it. Eight of them were nicking a living.
Yeah.
Just, head teacher. Oh, wow, you must be really good. No, you're not.
No.
And then I've moved on to professional football, and I've just witnessed people just interrupting you every day and not even listening to anything that you're saying. And that's not everyone. That's just again a third, a third, and a third. And then I've obviously experienced draconian, autocratic, narcissist bully as well, who I've worked directly under. So along that journey, you realise what's right and wrong. And I think this is really important that I share this. In the book, I've got a chapter called The Lion of Pride, and no one would ever have heard of it because I just made it up in the car. And I think sometimes in life, our line gets moved.
Mm.
Now, we know the difference between what's right and what's wrong. We all do, society does. But sometimes our line gets moved because of our fragility at the time or our vulnerability, and people take advantage of us. That might even be a family member or a colleague or, a loved one. And I think in the book, I've just said, we all know where our line is. So back yourself if you feel you're being mistreated. And by
Mm,
the way, that has to be facts, not opinion. So we also talk about subjective, objective, and just make sure that if you feel you're being wronged and your line of plying is being moved, say no. And I
mm,
want people in their 20s to read this and say, my boss is a bully because. And I
mm,
don't want people creating lawsuits out of this. I just want people to reflect as leaders and people to reflect as workers
mm.
to be able to know what's right and wrong. The final thing I'm going to say in support of leaders is sometimes people have got to shut their mouth and follow, right?
Yeah,
And you can't cause anarchy at work. And we need people that are good followers as well. So,
yeah,
Karen, yeah, you've read the book. It touches on everything.
yeah,
And yeah, I'm really excited for it to come out, and more importantly, I'm excited for it to help people. And the final thing is, I'm excited for people to email me or call me and say I disagree, because I also finally talk about the lens, and I don't see the world how you see the world, right? And there's too many people seeing their own narrow lens, and as you know, a big theme of the book is how we see the world. So
yeah.
I know I've waffled a bit on that one, but I think that will really create curiosity with the readers.
Yeah. And healthy debate's good, isn't it? I mean, and that is, but when I was listening to you talk about, third and a third and a third, and sort of leaders who shouldn't be leaders, and that's so true for so many people. How many people do you talk to who work and say, "Oh, my boss is a dick," or doesn't treat me well, and you're expected to just put up and shut up? And I think that's a really sort of clear message in the book, knowing when to say enough's enough. I don't have to do that, but also knowing when to. And I've worked with people who just like to cause anarchy just for the sake of it, because they're a bit disgruntled, or they're just a bit generally. You talk about happy hoovers and happy hairdryers. There are lots of happy hoovers in the world who just like to cause friction. So it's kind of balancing all of that out, isn't it? Really?
I talk about cultural architects in the book, and as leaders, if you've got people that make change when you're not in the room, then you need to let them go. No micromanagement going on with the cultural architects. And I think it all links back to low EQ. I've got a chapter in my first book, Educating Football, called Incompetent People Multiplied by Insecure People Equals Dangerous. And I've
Yeah,
picked that chapter up, as you know, and donked it straight into this book.
yeah,
And I think that insecure people that are incompetent, I think they chuck grenades at work, and I think they cause absolute havoc. So yeah, and then that then feeds into one of the chapters about gossip gurus and the low EQs, and so
yeah.
yeah, it's hopefully there's a bit of humour in there. I mean, the readers may or may not like this. There's a few F bombs in there. You made me take some of the F bombs out, Karen, didn't you? Because there was too many. So thank you
I
for
don't
that.
like
You're
an
like
F
my
bomb.
guardian angel.
I like an F bomb, but even I was
Yeah,
like,
but
no,
there's quite a
seriously.
few in there. There's quite a few. Yeah, I think
I
I
don't
took
want
out. I
people
think
to
Karen. I think I took out 50. I think I took out 50. So that's quite good.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I'm not adverse to an F bomb, but I think when there was five in one sentence, I was like, yeah, we're gonna have to rein that in, Steve. But but then again, like we've had this conversation before. You're quite unique in your approach, but I think what I like about you and what I like about the book is that you make no apologies for who you are, and that authenticity is lovely. You kind of I'm a huge fan of people where what you see is what you get. I'm not very good at the whole gameplay thing, or the kind of what is it, submersive messaging and all of that. I don't do that very well, so I quite like that. I quite like that you're out there and say it how it is. I think, and a lot of people will warm to that, I think. So yeah, but don't, yeah, it's not for the
Karen, I'm one thing. Yeah, one thing, Karen, I'm not doing. I'm never ever apologising to anyone for giving a shit about making the planet better.
yeah,
And if people don't like that, then that's their problem.
yeah,
And I'm also going to go back to this. every single person, yeah, and I mentioned this in the book, has had a school teacher that changed their life and a
Yeah,
school teacher which was objectively rubbish. Yeah, and
yeah,
that school teacher that changed your life has got the same qualification as the one that's rubbish and they get paid the same amount of money.
yeah,
And when I was a
yeah,
young 21-year-old teacher, I was so confused thinking you've got a doctorate and a PhD, in education and you're
yeah,
rubbish and the kids are destroying you. And then you're a teaching assistant and you're changing lives. And then you're not getting paid the same. Now I get like, listen, we don't want to open a can of worms with that one, but self-awareness, look in the mirror and not out the window. And if you've got a degree, yeah, which says you're good with teaching children, guess what? In my eyes, you've got to teach children, right? And not get involved in call them the low EQ crew. They just haven't got the low EQ crew, haven't got the awareness to know that actually they're not very good. The final thing, I did fluke the self-awareness bus. Remember, I worked in Lewisham and Greenwich, and the kids would say to me, at 21-year-old, Sallis, your lessons are shit, mate. Yeah. And most middle class schools, yeah, the kids wouldn't go, sir, your lessons aren't very good, would they?
they keep your face
So
up.
I'm very grateful, and Powley will love this. He's an old colleague. Kids would go, Sir, Powley's lessons are better than you, Sally's. Powley's lessons are better than you. And I'd be a dagger. So I'd be
Yeah,
driving home Friday, devastated. What can I do better to
yeah,
not be the downgrade? Which is
yeah,
another theme in the book.
yeah. But do you know what? But then, and I love that. I love that kids are they're your harshest critics, aren't they? Because they're brutally honest. But I think that's probably why you've gone on to do what you do. Because some people might have gone, well, that's their problem, not mine. But because I think you are quite a self-aware person, and because you are committed to being the best you can be and wanting to do better, it's all about taking on feet, however it's offered, whether it's your lessons are shit or whether it's given a little bit more kindly. It's about taking that feedback on board and listening and kind of actually acting on it, isn't it? That's the point.
But Karen, come on. I'm not even having any credit for that. How weird would it be to keep going into work every day and getting mugged off, yeah, and then not reflecting? So
Well,
you're
yeah,
saying, oh yeah,
right.
I think that's common sense, Karen. I think anyone that enters a profession called education that doesn't have an open-minded approach to themselves and other people, you're in the wrong job, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think you probably wouldn't, but I think people would be surprised how many people don't have that, which is a bit scary, isn't it? That's a whole nother topic. But I've met quite a few teachers who didn't have that, which goes back to your earlier point that perhaps they are in the wrong job. So, with regard to the writing, what would you say the writing and the publishing process? So, people who are listening to this podcast, there's a lot of writers or people who would like to write a book, or people just starting on their writing and publishing journey listening now. What would you say have been the biggest challenges with the writing and publishing process? I know you've touched on a few of those, but what would you say were the most challenging moments for you?
Well, let's bring you in here. An expert hires an expert. So I found you via recommendation. So that's changed my life, really. I'm also going to mention you here because I remember our first conversation and you gave me an hour of your time. And some people give you an hour of your time, then say the invoice is in the email. And you didn't do that. And immediately I'm like, I like that.
Mm,
I can work with this woman. And as you know, I had a few big publishers sniffing around, and I decided to go down respectfully down your route where it's more intimate. I get told the truth. I get to be my own sort of creative, and you didn't stifle my creativity. So yeah, I'm grateful to that. You also told me the truth. I mean, me and you were not shy telling each other the truth. We're still growing in our relationship, but we're straight, and that's cool.
mm,
So that was helpful to me because you would just message me and go, "Don't do this, don't do that," and take that out, and that makes no sense. So I'm very relaxed about that. And I say in the book, Karen, an expert hires an expert. So no, the I hope I gave it to you. I will say this better than many people. I mean, there was a real year's worth of editing myself before I gave it to you. So my advice to anyone is like if you want to write a book, first you go to Karen. Secondly, if you want to write a really good book, you've got to put your own work in. And like yeah, I know that this book's going to be successful. I just know it is because I know that the content in there is powerful, and I know it can change lives. It's theoretical and applied. And I think like if we relate this to your skill set, yeah, there is a science to creating a good book, right?
Mm,
And
mm.
I don't know what that science is compared to what you know, right? So again, the process is listen, plan, do, review, really. Me give it to you, you look at it, take it back, get a few opinions. I pulled you on a few things and you pulled me on a few things, and
Mm.
it was all quite relaxed, really, but we still got to say the truth about what we want, yeah?
Yeah, and I do think I've worked with lots of authors now and lots of kind of aspiring authors, and lots of people are quite surprised by the editing process. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted, is it? I mean, it's sometimes harder than actually writing the book. And if you've written a book, I've had people who I've worked with who I've edited it and then sent it back to them, and they're kind of a little bit surprised that they've got to read it again. But it's such a back and forth process. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think that's sort of credit to you that you did put in at least, well, you think you put in a year of editing and refining, and then we probably put in at least another 4 or 5 months. So if you want it to be good, you've got to put the effort in, and it's not
Yeah.
a one and done process. And I've even had authors say to me, well, I've found a typo. Well, I'd be a little bit disappointed if you hadn't. Because it's a constant evaluative process of kind of tweaking, refining, and that doesn't happen overnight, does it?
No, and I think both books have taken me a year to edit, so there's the facts there.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, it's full on, and why do 5 years to then get a loose product at the end?
yeah,
And there's still going to be some flaws in this book, and you've taught me that there's always going to be. I've got some notes actually for
yeah,
the re-edit after it all comes out because I know we
yeah.
can do that. Still a few things that I'm not happy with, but I think like my whole business and my whole career, Karen, has been about detail. Like small margins make a big difference, and I'm proud of myself. And I haven't got here by fluke. I've
No.
got here by serious reflection, working in the toughest environments in the country, changing careers, building a business. Because you know why all these things? Because you get one life,
Yeah,
and you get one life, and then it's gone.
yeah.
And so that I need to thank my mum and dad for that because as I'll talk about in the book, my dad took me to a nightclub when I was 10, and then took me to the all night cafe at 4 in the morning, and then all of these social nuances.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrible, isn't it? But he didn't do it every weekend, by the way. So we're clear, he
Oh,
did it
it's all
once.
right.
But it's all these social nuances, and I think like I'm very grateful to my parents for putting me in so many different social situations, which
Mm,
has enabled me and my brother to both. My brother's a head teacher, and a very good one, and a very normal one, and a very down to earth one.
yeah,
So again, like forgetting your job title, let's just be a good person, right?
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. And so, sort of, my final questions are: firstly, what's the best thing about writing this book, and what do you hope? I mean, and you've touched on this a little bit, but what's your main hope or vision for the book?
Well, my main hope, no pressure, Karen, is people go to Gatwick Airport and see it on the shelves of WH Smiths and they go, oh, oh, and they
Oh,
might see it
yeah,
by the colour or they might
yeah,
see it by the title. Yes, it's
yeah,
Larry,
yeah.
but it says there, an expert hires an expert. So if you don't know something, go and get someone that can. And I want this to really get people to understand that there is help out there for a better life,
Mm, mm,
personally or professionally. So there's a lot of people stuck. I've had
yeah,
times where I'm stuck. There's a lot of people
yeah,
stuck, and sometimes we just need a bit of help. So that's really what I want. I want people to read it and go, "That's really helped me." That's it.
yeah.
That's all I want.
That's excellent. And I have to say, some books I edit, and I enjoy edit, but some books I enjoy editing more than others. And yours was definitely, as I was reading it, I was thinking, I need to think about that, or making notes of my own. So I thoroughly enjoyed editing it, and I know that people are going to love it. So if you haven't, Steve's book is launching on Thursday, the 6th of June, which, as we record this, is tomorrow, big D Day tomorrow. But if you listen to this on the replay, then the book will already be out, and you really should get yourself a copy of How Not to Be a Leadership Dickhead by the lovely Steve Sallis. Will be available on Amazon.
And But,
Uh,
but
Go on.
Karen, and build a high performing team. Yeah,
Sorry, and
and
build
build a
a
high performing team.
high.
Yes, yes.
I
That's
forgot the
because
two
that's the
titles.
key bit. That's the key
Yeah,
bit.
It is.
So yes, Karen, I think it's important I end it with this. Thank you on the record for your commitment and Danny's commitment to my project. You know, it's become our project, but I'm grateful to your diligence and your humour too. So yeah, we've laughed as well, and I think,
Yeah.
as I say, I think I say in the back of the book, I say it's important to have a bit of humour, isn't it? Like you
Well,
can't take ourselves too seriously. So
laughter.
I'd highly recommend Karen, by the way, everybody. Get Karen if you want to write a book. There's a book in everyone. Get Karen in your life.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. You've been a dream client. You've been fabulous to work with, and I do like that. Yeah, we have managed to laugh a bit. I'm a huge fan of laughter. I think life would be a little bit grey and dull without it, wouldn't it? So, thank you to everyone to listening. If you want to get in touch, you can get in touch with me, Karen Stanley at mabelandstanley@outlook.com. If you are thinking about writing a book, just as Steve has done, and if you haven't got your copy, get yourself onto Amazon because it will change your life, I'm sure. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all again next week.